All right, everyone. So we are nearly finished with this book. Yay. It's been, we probably could have squeezed another chapter in this week because these weren't hectic chapters. But they do sort of relate to each other, maybe, which is why it was good that we didn't. But let's just check in on last week's sort of actions. How did we all do with the priorities that we set up for ourselves last week? Some of them were to revisit primary aims. Some of them were to define standards. How did we do?
I think for me it's ongoing, and it's not I mean, it's not a moving target, but it's dynamic. From one month to the next, I feel I either learn something new or the business does something different, and you've got to realign. So I looked at number four.
Hmm.
So I constantly feel like I have got the budget and the numbers open in the background on my desktop, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it does consume me. And then I start saying scenarios. What if this happens? What if we lose a customer? What if we gain a new one? What would it look like if we did X, Y, and Z? So yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of mind space and time, but I quite like doing the scenarios, which I'm busy doing right now as well. So yeah, it's ongoing. So it does work for me, but it's always top of mind, number four.
I think it's very good to be very in touch with your numbers. Um, I definitely think it's something that I could potentially be better at. Um, but not to let if you're sort of chasing a number, not to take work on that doesn't align with, the game that you've described for everybody, because then you end up with this, you create this confusion, So I think being aware of the numbers is great, so long as you're not creating an environment of we're going to zigzag all over the show because we're chasing a specific number. Because that can cause quite a lot of confusion amongst the team and in your market.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, and then it's something for me to reflect on as well. I spent quite a lot of time last year having conversations with people who bring in freelancers to do work for them. And then this year, I've spent quite a lot of time setting my business up more along the lines of business consulting and coaching. And now some of those freelance roosters have come home. What do you say? The freelance chickens have come home to roost. And so now I'm finding myself taking some of that freelancing work, but I really want to be more along the lines of the consultant and coach. And it is exactly that. It's that knowing that December, January is coming. It's a quiet time. People won't be doing read-alongs. People won't be doing coaching. People won't be doing courses. And so, how do you buffer for that time? Now, if I wasn't thinking about the numbers and thinking about that time, then I might say no to the freelancing opportunities because I'm like, oh, that's not what I do anymore. But knowing that the dip is coming, I think helps you sort of prioritize as well. So it's a bit of chicken and egg situation. Christelle, how did you go? I think you were going to revisit your primary aim. Hey.
I did. I actually did them all. So I went through all of them. I said I was going to do that. So the primary aim, it was just nice to realign again to see that I am on track. I refined some areas in my space. So it was good. It was a good exercise. So thank you for that.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear it. Pumla, which one of these was? I know you had a hectic week. You've been in Cape Town since Thursday. You managed to get to any of this?
I thought I was supposed to do the SOP, but I'm not sure where it is here.
Oh, it's
Was I
here.
supposed to do
I
that?
think it's under where you would start replacing yourself.
Oh, so I asked Christelle, she sent me an SOP, so then I ticked it and I was like, yes, I'm done.
Okay. You see, you just chose the easiest one and then you outsource it to your VA.
I was happy to do it. It was really cool.
All right, so we're talking now about the management strategy. So this is chapter 15, and this is a really short chapter, mostly that story about the hotel that he went to. But I must say, reading that story, I was like, I'd like to go to this hotel where there's a whiskey waiting for me when I get back to my room and the fire is on and the coffee arrives.
It did feel a little bit unreal. I've ever gone to any hotel that remembers who I was. Yeah, geez, I don't
feel
know.
like
Maybe
all the
thank you
directors
hotels that are just out of our league.
Yeah. Maybe that's what it is.
That's what I thought as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the management development sort of highlights for me was firstly this management strategy. Our management strategy should be to create an automatic system using manuals and checklists and try and automate as much as we can. Now, my background, when I hear automation, I think robots, like RPA and tech, but I don't think that that's really what he means, right? I think he's really about saying, you know, if you do a thing repeatedly, then there should be a standardized way of doing it that is, you know, you almost do it on automatic. So, and it's caused me to look at some of the things that I do in my business, like and some of the things I do for Derek's in his business. So like the marketing, you know, having those emails, preparing, scheduling, sending the things out, checking out daily, you know, to have that like routine that you go through in that particular department. But every department, every person in the business needs, like, you know, here are the 3 things you do daily, because those 3 things move the business forward. Like the Donald Miller critical actions that I think we were all on that read along together. Those critical actions that can be done daily by everybody in the business that move the business forward towards your business objective as the business owner. Definitely like something that I've reflected on, creating that process. And then looking at the up and coming people in the business that are up and coming managers, and not necessarily hiring in these heavy hitters, but looking at to see who could we promote internally, who's got the ability to put systems together and to improve systems and to train others how to use the system. And make sure that our business is profitable and operates better than any other. So yeah, I wonder, you know, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm really wondering about not hiring a second person. I just said that out loud. And then thinking about all the things that I'd have to do to make sure that they're productive every day. I mean, that's a worry of mine, because I like people to be like, know what they need to do and get on with it. I don't really love management. So yeah, how automated are your systems? How upgradable are your people, I think, is the question.
I mean, I think for me, my systems are fairly automated, but more from a system point of view. But the only problem in the system is me. Like I'm a hindrance. Like now I have to do quality assurance, I think, on 2 reports. And now because I've been in Cape Town and because I've been doing this, I just haven't been able to do that. And so then the system is not flowing because now I've stopped it, you know. So I feel like I do have a system and I have processes, but I am the problem.
You are the constraint.
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, law of constraint says that when you have a constraint, you have to maximize that constraint. So you have to push as much work through the constraint as you can, but then, you know, deal with the fact that there are constraints on either side. Like, what can you make go faster or slower to be able to maximize what you can do, but not have stuff waiting.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I can upskill the OT and say to her, you know, the next 2 weeks I'm going to be really busy. I need you to do the report and then do a QA of your own reports and then send it to me, so that she knows she needs to spend another 30 minutes on it to make sure that it's correct. So that would be upskilling, I guess, on her part. Even if I have to maybe just pay her a little extra to do that.
What does the process of QA involve, Pamela?
In my mind, it involves my mind. It involves my clinical reasoning. It involves thinking like my customer and making sure that the report answers the question. It involves it involves the clinical reasoning. And because the person helping me do the report hasn't seen the person, for her to do that, it might just mean me doing a voice note and saying, this is my recommendation, this is my conclusion, and then she will be able to pick up and then write based on I think it would just actually be a voice note, because then she would know where the case was going.
And would you still then need to check the report at all? I'm sure you would.
Yeah, I still would, but then it would maybe be a little bit easier.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Cool. All right. So that, I mean, that's something to think about. I think the action points for me from chapter 5 was to look at where you needed the standards, standard operating procedures, the manuals to checklists. Oh, apologies for that spelling error. And like also who's overseeing that stuff, and are they actually doing a good job of overseeing that? And then also thinking about, you've got a system in place, who could you promote to use that system? Does it have to be you, or could you bring somebody in to use that system? Yeah, so I think those are the two things to think about for chapter 15. I think the real nuggets were in chapter 16, which is your people strategy. I thought that there were some really good things in here. I love the way that he says you can't get people to do anything unless you create an environment in which doing it is more important to your people than not doing it. And I think because we're dealing with humans, it's all about the psychology. Hey.
Sorry, Anne, can I ask a quick question about the management strategy before
Yes.
the people? So is that when because he keeps talking about the 3 people, right? The technician, the manager, and the third one?
And the entrepreneur.
And the entrepreneur. So when he's talking about the manager, all the manager needs to do is automate systems, develop a process, and produce a result. Those are the 3 action items of the manager.
Yes. So automate the system, define the process, and produce the marketing result. Remember, the marketing result was doing it better and more profitably than your competition, essentially, or than anyone else in the market.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have people working for you, or you have a team of people that you're working with, freelancers or whatever the case may be, it's looking to see where will this management system be the most effective? Like, in whose hands will this management system be the most effective? Does that make sense?
You mean like in the book, he was the guy that was just employed, the manager who had just been employed was almost like picked from the street type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that guy saw something in him that he resonated with in terms of the intelligence and the personality fit to be able to operate his operating system that he'd already created, right? So, I mean, and again, this comes back to that Donald Miller stuff for me, is like, you create your critical actions, you create your goals that you want for your company, you create the economic priorities that you want to meet. And in order to meet those things, what type of people do you need to hire? And then you look for those types of people rather than trying to hire somebody random and fit them into your system. You look for people who fit in with your values, who fit in with your system that you've created. So even though that guy hadn't been to hotel school, he didn't have any hospitality training and experience really, he was the right fit for what the owner needed in order to get the operating system through,
Yeah.
And I think back to I don't want to say the cliche term, the good old days, but back in the sort of early 2000s or even the 90s when Dimension Data was building itself out, it was hiring people based on the front end of the business, based on how charismatic and how good they were with people. They didn't mind that they never had a background in technology. It was a technology company.
Yeah.
So you had people that were coming out of jobs where they were game rangers and they were interacting with important high-level people on a level that most people don't get to see socially. And not a lot, but I can think of at least 3 of the people that eventually did very well in Dimension Data in those days were actually started their careers in the, what do you call it, the hotel industry or whatever that industry is. Hospitality, where they were just good with people. And the technical side was, you'd always have a backup with a technical person, but to be successful, they identified that as quite neat. And I mean, they were obviously very successful, over those years where people were buying technology and you had a people person that they were hiring, as opposed to a very subject matter expert or a technical expert. They were just very good people.
Yeah.
That's such a good point, Derek.
Good.
I mean, I was just at a conference now with private practice owners in occupational therapy, and I asked them, who are your practice managers? Like, are you getting another OT to then manage your practice, or you're getting a total different skill set? And a lot of them were getting people who are not technicians, and I thought that was good. I think more to your point that you don't actually want the face being someone who's technical, because you're just going to confuse the customer, because you're just going to be talking jargon the whole time.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. I also think, so MTN did the reverse a couple of years ago. In around 2020, 2021, they came up with a thing where they said that there was now minimum education criteria for people to hold certain roles, especially in like the account management teams. And I had a relationship with one of these guys who was struggling because he now wanted a promotion post, but he couldn't get it unless he did some kind of course and degree. And he was like, holding down a account management role at MTN, studying part-time. He had a young family, young children. It was really, really hectic for him, But then all I think about on the other side is all MTN's doing there is just increasing their salary bill. I mean, those people may not necessarily actually be the right fit, but because they've got the right piece of paper, they then can command like an even bigger salary from MTN. So, I mean, I think there is that, and that's where the Michael Gerber thing comes in. We did a couple of chapters ago. It's like the system needs to be able to be performed by the lowest qualified person. And the lowest qualified person performing the system also means that it's very profitable and cost effective for you as the business owner. In some cases, for me, the lowest qualified person is ChatGPT. Like I employ that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, right. So now we're going to move on. Yeah, we've moved on to people strategy, and so the question is, how do we convey the importance of doing something so that people get it and it becomes important to them, and so they then want to do it themselves. Because I think we've got this, like when you're a business owner, it's important to you because it's going to grow your business and it's feeding your goals. But we get frustrated by the lack of ownership mentality across the board with our people, and we realize that it's because they're not the owners of the business, so they're very unlikely to demonstrate this ownership trait. And so the first thing that struck me was defining this big idea, was giving people, giving people a kind of a reason, a purpose, the idea behind the work being more important than the actual work itself. Kind of goes back to what is that one thing that you can say that kind of almost gives everybody a reason to buy into what it is that you're doing. Closing that story loop for them and helping them understand why this work means something in the greater scheme of the world, and not just to their back pockets when they collect their salary at the end of the day. So defining that sort of big idea is and he had a couple of examples where they were little like takeaways, feeding people or housing people, or that kind of thing. I was working with a property company last week. I was training their leasing agents, and that company's big idea is providing people with dignity by giving them homes that affirm their dignity. And I think that's really beautiful. So the question is, what is the big idea that you can communicate to your team that helps them to really ascribe to the activities you're asking them to do on a daily basis? I don't know if anyone can articulate that big idea already.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, you talk about the system and the processes being pretty rigid, and people. Yeah, I mean, I suppose if people have buy-in into creating the actual product and the system that is being delivered, then I think you're halfway there, as opposed to imposing, this is the way we do it, and your input is not really needed because we're not going to change it. This is black and white. This is the way we're going to deliver it to our customer. And I think of an instance last week where one of the staff sitting on a customer site wrote up a process which and quite a junior person within the team, but believed that his process was better, and we gave him the platform to voice that with the customer, and I just sensed he felt so empowered in his job to be able to actually raise a new way of doing something because he has seen it and he's working on it. And why wouldn't we ask him? Because he's doing it every day, and that process needs to be adapted and changed. And so we're now looking at implementing the process which he's developed with the customer, as opposed to the standard one which has been on the table for so many years. So I think it's also allowing the flexibility in your so-called, rigid, this is the way we deliver to a customer day 1 to day 365. I think there must be some flexibility in there to allow your staff to give input, and then to recognize that sometimes they're more qualified to come up with a better idea than what you are if you're not at the coalface.
Yeah, I totally agree, Derek. And I think that's part of building innovation capabilities into your organization, is to say to people, hey, here's the standard operating procedure, and in the absence of anything, this is how it gets done. But if you can improve upon this, we want to hear from you. I think that's also how you start identifying top talents, is people who take the time to go, you know what, there is a better way, and here is the better way. So I would much rather hire people like that than people who just take that same procedure and they just monkey see, monkey do, don't actually test it against whether or not it's viable, whether or not it works in this particular environment. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's phenomenal. So we had the next thing was about getting people to take their job seriously. And yeah, I mean, for me, this really kind of goes back to the whole thing of living by example, you know, like what is the big idea? What is it that the boss takes seriously enough to spend time communicating to newbies or to the people that that work with you? So when you take on a new freelancer or you take on a new staff member, it's taking the time to explain, this is what we do, this is why it's valuable to the world. This is what my goal is for the company, and you know, this is where you fit into that kind of big picture. I think sometimes we think that the person who's managing that employee must do it, like it's their responsibility to communicate all of that correctly. But then we operate under the assumption that they actually have a clear picture of it. And that's a little bit dangerous because now you're getting somebody else to communicate your big idea. When I read this, I was like, yeah, I remember when I was at Discovery, there was a guy called John Alexander, and he was one of the 4 directors who got together and started Discovery. So Discovery started at Rand Merchant Bank. There were like 3 actuaries and an IT guy, and they got together and they were like, we want to start this thing. And so Rand Merchant Bank gave them the space to try. And that's sort of where Discovery came from. And one of the guys' names, he was the IT guy, was John Alexander. And this guy, so I did work for Discovery from like 2010 to 2012-ish. And this guy did employee induction every single month on the first day of the month. His calendar was blocked out by his PA for however many hours it was. The new employees would come in, they would go through the process of getting their access cards, getting their photos taken, like all of that like logistical stuff. And then they would go and they would sit with this guy for a morning and he would do induction with them. He would tell them how Discovery started. He would tell them, you know, what they stood for, like what their goals were, how they fit into the picture. And he did that induction until he retired. They saw it as that important that people in the business heard from one of the founders. I'd love to know who does it now that he's left. It'd be very interesting to find out. But I felt that was so great that, you know, he was, by that time, I think his title was CIO, that, you know, one of the chief execs of the business met every single new person in Discovery. Like, amazing.
Yeah, that is incredible. Sure. I mean, and maybe that goes to the, you know, if you've got spare cycles in the day, then fill it up with the stuff, the small things that drive compassion and not necessarily the big things that drive revenue. Because often that makes a big difference to people when, you know, you're looking back into the business and mentoring as opposed to looking forward in the business and trying to land another customer. Sometimes looking in the rearview mirror is a good idea.
Yeah, and letting people know that they matter, that they're important, that they're taken seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love the part in the book, I know it's not this chapter, where she is like throwing her like she's angry or she's upset because she's hired that guy and he's hired 3 other people, and there's that line where they say everyone looks at each other and asks themselves, who was that? Like they don't even know who the boss is, and then the guy's like, oh, that was just the boss. And I think it's just true because she never took the time out to introduce herself clearly, or explain anything, and then that can happen when things go wrong. Then you suddenly, show up and you're like, this is wrong, and everyone's like, who are you and where have you been all this time?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then I think also taking the time to communicate with clarity. This is something that I could definitely work on. I definitely don't have enough like one-on-one time with the people that I am managing. And that's something that I could do better, is just making sure that there are regular scheduled check-ins to make sure we're on the same page, that we're all still going in the same direction. So, and when I said the people that I'm managing, like I think about my bookkeeper, I've outsourced that to somebody else, but I still have a bookkeeper and I still need to meet with her so that she knows like what's going on in the business and why are you seeing these types of transactions come through. And when it's important. And obviously with my VA, and I've got a couple of other people that do little bits and bobs here. Like, when I give them a project, like I've got a copy editor. When I give her a project, just to take the time to meet with her and explain the project and make sure that there's clarity and that the outcomes that I want are clearly defined and that there's structure to each one of the pieces of work that I give her. So yeah, I think I could explain my big idea really well, but I think what I'm really bad at is thinking that other people will get it and have the clarity that I have and just get on with doing the thing. Christelle, any comments there?
I think you communicate very well. So just so that
On
you know, because of the hours that we keep. So that is our mode that we use, to communicate with each other. And if something's not clear, I know as a provider myself, I will make sure that I understand an instruction before just jumping into it headlong, and then missing the boat altogether. So I fully understand that. And I agree with you. We do need to communicate with our people that we outsource, from every level. That reminds me, I actually need to speak to my bookkeeper as well. So thank you for that. I haven't spoken to her in a bit, so yeah. Office hours, unfortunately, doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, definitely. And then there was this people game. I wonder what you guys thought of that. So the rules of the people game, I have paraphrased it a little bit because sometimes I was like, you could have said that in a shorter way that makes more sense to me. So they're not exactly like they are in the book. But for me, the first one was the game comes first. So and then what people do is secondary. So when I read that, I was like, your business and what your business needs to achieve, your big idea, that's the main thing. And then the actual, like, what they do is secondary. So like Derek, that example you gave of the guy who's innovated the process, it's like the game is to manage the outsourced environment amazingly, better than what the customer could have managed it. I think, like, if I was to summarize the game there, it's like, do this better than the customer can do it. and then what they actually do in terms of their standard operating procedure that they've got is secondary, because you can refine their standard operating procedure based on like where you're playing the game. And so, yeah, like that's how I interpreted that one. I don't know if anybody else had a different interpretation. If you're wanting to like look at that in the book, it's on playing the game. There it is. The rules start on page 205. If you've got the hard copy. Then the second one, never create a game you are unwilling to play. So that, I mean, that was one of that's one of my rules. It's like, I would never ask somebody that works for me to do something that I'm not prepared to do myself. Yeah. Then making sure that there are ways of winning for people that don't end the game for them. It's like And I think this is a little bit tricky in a small business, because I thought that this was about eliminating glass ceilings in the business, like where people actually can't level up in the business, because if they do, there's like they've got no more way to go in terms of promotion opportunities. So how do you manage that in a small business?
Yeah, how do you, I mean, when people are reaching the, their potential in a particular role, and you don't have another role, or another opportunity for them in the business, but they're good people, how do you hang on to them?
Yeah,
What can
that's
you,
the question.
well, what can you do? I mean, that is very tricky, and I think in a small business, that's always going to be a challenge, and I think the sooner you learn to accept that the reason they're at their potential and they're doing well in your business is not going to provide them the growth, the sooner you could let them go and let them flourish elsewhere. You'll find someone else. To hang on to them would be, I don't know, killing the soul.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there are going to be people that either age out or they max out in terms of what they can, what they can achieve. But I think it's almost trying, the longer we can keep them engaged and almost not trick them, because we're not trying to be manipulators here, but engage them. And that's, I mean, the book speaks about, unless there are victories in the process, your people will grow weary. So like that guy that's now innovated, that is something to celebrate, like throughout the whole company almost. And that kind of behavior needs to be acknowledged and celebrated, and it's a victory, and he needs to see it as a victory. And I think that's kind of what we have to do as leaders, is to call out the good stuff people are doing, whether it's a freelancer or whether it's somebody that works for you, calling out the good stuff people do and acknowledging it, and creating that sense of buzz and excitement and energy around it, so that kind of thing is encouraged within the business and that person feels acknowledged. Because if they don't win, then they'll go look for somewhere else where they can win. So I think it is about calling out the winningness of those that work in our businesses. And I think it also gives the rest of those who are watching an idea of what good looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 4 was change the tactics, not the strategy of the game from time to time. Change is necessary. So, and we don't want the game to become boring. So we've got to change it up for people. And so, introduce new things, here's a new, another thing I want you to do. Here's a new system we're going to work on. Here's a different way of working. We're working towards the same target, but we're working differently. Not everybody loves change though, so got to be aware of that. And then number 5 was, the game is not self-sustaining. People need to be reminded. This was absolutely my management bugbear, was the fact that you had to tell people over and over and over and over and over again what it was that they should be doing, what it was that we're trying to achieve together, and to create the spaces to tell people over and over and over again. So I was wondering what are the ways that you guys have created in your business to keep on telling people or reminding people how the game is played and what they are aiming for?
So in my past, and what they used to do at Telesure and all these other places, they used to do these team builds and staff, not wellness days, but it was days that was focused on the people for that, and then whatever the focus for the business was during that financial year was the message that was driven, you know, and it was up to certain stakeholders and owners for that process to make sure that things get communicated, people were invited, that they were attending, and that the message landed, if you know what I'm saying. So they understood what is expected, and then you just do reminders as you go along through that the following quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters, whatever the plan was. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing. Every company that I've ever been to has done something like that, especially if it's big corporate companies. You know, they have to. It's tricky to keep them all communicate. It's, I think, the easiest way to do it for big groups of people.
Yeah. So, I mean, how regularly did they get together, Christelle?
We try to do it at least once a year, and say, this is the drive for this year, this is the focus for this year. If things change, because things do change, then it's a bit more regular. But it was usually just the once a year situation, you know, if it was a big piece of communication that needed to be shared with everyone. But yeah.
Yeah,
I think it should be more regular than that. I think it's like maybe every 6 months, you know.
Yeah, but I think then what happens is you have a big corporate rah-rah like that, and then I think the idea, whether or not this happens, I don't know, the idea is that then the team leaders and the managers take those things into their weekly meetings that they're having. And, you know, they focus on those priorities. So it actually then becomes the job of the manager to make sure that this is regularly spoken about. And then that's why it's so important that the managers are so well connected to the owners of the business. And when that's, so, and that's the same in a smaller business. The owner and the managers need to remain connected and on the same page, because otherwise the managers aren't managing effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah. Number 6, the game has to make sense based on universal truths that people can buy into. So I was thinking, what are these universal truths? And they're just things that are logical, I think. Yeah, so the game has to be logical. And I'm guessing people for whom the game is illogical probably won't last long in your organization. 7, the game needs to be fun from time to time. Pumla, how do you keep the game fun for yourself and for the people that work with you?
So, you know, this is my biggest challenge in life. That's why I have nothing to say.
Do you get your people together? Your QA OT person who does those reports?
No.
Okay, how could you do it better? I mean, you don't necessarily have to get together with them, but how could you make it fun, or how could you make sure that there's a sense of winning for them?
I feel like the fun is in the paycheck. Yeah. If I pay you on time, that's it. Send me your invoice. I just want to be that employer or that consultant that pays you on time. Like, that's what I want my relationship to be like.
Cool. Derek, how do you make the game fun from time to time, not every day?
Yeah, it's a challenge. You know, and I think what you said earlier about sharing the small wins with the whole team. So not if there's a win in the business that's got nothing to do with staff member that might be on a completely different customer side. It's good to have some sort of mechanism where you share those wins. I think that creates a good culture of sharing. But it is a tricky one. Sometimes, you try and force get-togethers and you assume this is what your staff want to hear, and they are completely bored, and all they want to do is eat the pizza. So yeah, you've got to hit the nail on the head. There's a balance, and you can't give up, because that number 7 has to be there. You have to be present, and you need to be the one making it a bit more fun, as opposed to, you know, regurgitating numbers. We're surviving, we're doing okay, or it's got to be a bit more than that. So it's a challenge. I'm guilty as charged there from not making it more fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also goes back to point 5, where the game is not self-sustaining. So you can't, it takes effort. That fun takes effort, and reminding people of what the big idea is takes effort. And sometimes these things are well received, and sometimes they're not well received. And it's just, it's almost like a bit of a guessing game. But yeah. But I mean, I also said to him, also like what he says in the book, he's like, from time to time, like once every 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think, I mean, and we've got I mean, between the two of us, we've got that task to look at some wellness stuff. So I think the game, I mean, needs to be fun, and I don't think it needs to be centered around, what your people are doing. I think sometimes it's good to take them out of that environment and out of that thinking, and do something that shows that either I or the business, or both the business and the owner, care about their employees. And that care can come through in something really small, a bunch of flowers, a talk by somebody that's addressing pertinent points in their personal lives, or just something to show that we all human, and we all have we all go through various stages of tough times. But if the company can add something to a dynamic that shows you care, I think that could be translated as fun, if they see some caring stuff coming through.
Yeah, I agree. I think wellness stuff is caring, and I think it can be fun.
It can be fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be all serious.
Yeah, I also think like just getting together, can also just be fun. Just getting together, it doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be like a major event. We're not taking everyone to Gold Reef City, but just, being all in one room and sharing stories. I think that can be fun.
Or even having like a food truck rock up at the office, after
Yes.
your split session and numbers discussion, quick,
Yeah.
half hour, and then just let the guys go fetch their food, and just bond and connect, so.
Yeah.
I had
dry.
2 weeks ago, I just said to everybody, during your lunch break, come back to my house and have a lunch. We'll just get some pizzas and have some cold drinks or whatever. And it was just, an hour or two out of a Friday afternoon, and I got more positive feedback from that than the thousands I spent on booking out a restaurant for some fancy Christmas dinner. It was just because I think it made it more personal. Like, come back to my house and have something to eat and a cup of tea, and maybe my wife's there, maybe the kids are there, the dog's certainly there. So, it just makes it a bit more personal, I think. So I think that's something I need to do more of, to show the staff that, I'm also just human, and their needs outside of work are pretty much the same as mine. So let's enjoy that from time to time. Let's just get together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lovely example of, it doesn't need to cost much, and it doesn't need to be much. It's just lunch. Come and have lunch. Yeah. And then the last one is, if you can't think of a good way. He says steal one, I just said imitate one. But then you have to learn it off by heart, right? So if somebody else has got a really great business model and they're doing something really, really great, they steal their ideas, imitate their ideas, but then make sure that it comes across as genuine, not something that you're doing because so-and-so did it and it was a good idea. That it comes across as something that's genuinely going to move your organization and your people forward. Like you genuinely buy into that way of doing it. Does it make sense? Okay, so a game worth playing was you know, one of the things that he touches on towards the end of the chapter. And I thought people resonate when there's a sense of purpose to what they're doing, like a raison d'être. That resonates with people when the purpose of the organization and the purpose of their purpose is aligned. I think like you'll find a lot of people in the NGO space will be there because of this like sense of purpose. For some people, their purpose is like, you know, I work to live, not live to work. And so therefore, this is not going to be as meaningful for them, but they're still going to want to align with maybe your business values. And so there's another thing that comes to play here when we're looking at, do we have a game worth playing, is are there values that people can align with? Are there relationships within the organization? Do we work on relationships? Do we build that sense of community? How do we work on those relationships? How do we build that sense of community? I think, Derek, what you have done with bringing people back to your home, I think that definitely builds a sense of community, you know. And then for especially, I think, is there a sense of order and structure, or is it just like organized chaos? I think there are people in this world that can't work in chaotic environments and need that sense of order and structure, and they need their work to have meaning. So I wonder if you look at these sort of things, if there's anything there where you're like, oh, I could work on better relationships, or I don't really have a defined set of values for my business, so that would be something I could put into place to make this game a bit more worth playing for others. And then this quote has come back where he says to Sarah, remember, Sarah, that it's delegation rather than abdication. You can't delegate your accountabilities, because delegating your accountabilities is abdication. So that's quotes come back from the management by abdication chapter that he did right early in the book. But then the thing is, as a business owner, what are those things that you are accountable for and you actually can't delegate? And that's one of the questions that I thought for our action points for chapter 16 is, what are those things that you should never delegate to a manager? That you as the business owner should always have your finger on that. That should always be your responsibility. You're not delegating that to anybody in your business. I wonder if you could answer that.
Oh, I remember being on a sales thing and they said that you must never delegate your sales as a small business owner. I mean, I don't know what everyone else's experience is, but yeah, we were told that you should do that yourself as the business owner.
I think you can delegate marketing, right? But I think you need to be intricately involved in the sales process. Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a book that I read, From Impossible to Inevitable, I think it's called, and that one said founders must sell. So if you are the founder of the business, that why and that passion really sits with you. You know, you can't get someone else to have that same passion about the business. It's not their business. They didn't found it. So founders must sell in small businesses is along the same lines, Pamela.
Mm.
What else should you never delegate to the manager?
I mean,
About technical work. I'm sorry.
no.
I
I
was
think,
just saying
and the one
technical.
thing, if you've got shareholders, you know, there's an accountability there that has to be yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be doing management accounts, explaining how the business is doing well or not doing well, and the shareholders meeting, that's something that you've got to, even if it's, you know, a very minor, small shareholder, they have vested interest in the organization. You can't ask somebody that's not a shareholder to explain that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that accountability for performance.
Mm.
Yeah. Christelle, what will you never delegate?
At the moment, everything.
I said never, not this week.
I don't know. I've got a thing about control, and so this is going to be a big one for me to work on. But yes, I agree. Never delegate sales. Definitely not. And what Derek said. So yeah, I at the moment I just want to do everything. So everything's on my plate. So
Look, I think there are businesses where you can delegate sales. Like if you're selling a product, right? Like if you're selling this pen, like it's a pen, it has certain features and it does a certain thing, and it's very tangible. And anybody who's looking for a green highlighter might buy this pen. And so all you've got to do is find a group of people who buy green highlighters and convince them that this highlighter is better than any other highlighter on the market. And because it's a commodity, you're probably competing on price anyway. And so therefore, commoditized market, easy to outsource sales. But if you are selling a service and that service is predominantly driven by yourself or by teams of people that you have trained to follow your standard operating procedures and your methodologies, then you probably can't outsource that. People, because the fact of the matter is that your expertise, your knowledge is the commodity, and you've got to convince the customer that your knowledge and your expertise are superior to your competitors. And so that's, I think, why in service industry, for a large part, you've got to have, until your business gets to a certain size, it's got to be
my finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Really agree.
I don't know what that size is though, like where you can completely outsource sales and build a sales team. I think there are elements of sales that you can outsource, like the administration, sorting out the CRM system and sending out the email, but that's all marketing actually. But those sales conversations and following up on those sales conversations and the relationship part of it with the customer, I don't think you can outsource that.
No, I agree.
All right, everyone, it's 12 o'clock. So next week we are reading chapter, what are we doing next week? Let's have a look. Chapter 17 to the end is what we are doing next week. So it's not very long. I think it's 2 chapters. And maybe 2 chapters, about 50 pages. So we will see you next week for the last episode of EMIS. Thank you all for joining us. Good luck. Have a wonderful week. See you soon.
Thanks, Anne.